Robby, what's on your radar?
So in May, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law a bill that required Florida public schools to set aside 45 minutes of instruction on November the 7th for Victims of Communism Day. So the point of the law, according to DeSantis, was to make sure that students had a grasp of communism's very real and very large death toll historically. In the 20th century, communism was responsible for an estimated 65 million deaths. Those deaths came in the forms of political purges, deportations, and mass murders, as well as famines, both deliberate and accidental. The Bolshevik Red Terror, the Holodomor in Ukraine, Mao's Great Famine. This is communism's body count, and it's extensive. So there are many victims of communism in Europe and Asia, but there are also victims in South America, people who flee countries like Cuba and like Venezuela. They're fleeing political repression, societal collapse, and economic hardship wrought by left-wing authoritarianism, corruption, and poorly planned economies. That's what makes this recent news cycle, the only thing everyone has been talking about all weekend, the migrant trips to Martha's Vineyard, so frustrating because, in fact, there's just so much hypocrisy on display here. Among Republicans, yes, among Democrats as well, and most of all, and surprisingly, among the media. But I wanted to start with Republicans because we discussed the other groups in our top of the show a little bit. So I think Republicans are clearly using human beings here as part of a political stunt. Now, you might agree with the stunt, you might think it proves a valid point, but let's be clear, it's a stunt nonetheless. Further, if DeSantis thinks it's important to recognize the victims of communism, well, why is he treating them this way? Why is he acting like they're some kind of scourge? As my colleague at Reason Magazine, Fiona Harrigan, writes, if Ron DeSantis hates communism, well, then he shouldn't weaponize victims of communism. Harrigan points out that as recently as last year, DeSantis spoke favorably of the people who flee these regimes to find refuge in the United States. Why would somebody flee across shark-infested waters, say leaving from Cuba, to come to southern Florida, he has said back then? Why would people leave communist countries and risk their life to be able to come here? It's important that students understand that. Well, given that past rhetoric, I think it's a little rich for DeSantis to decide the best thing to do with victims of communism is to ship them to blue states. Now, that said, the hypocrisy of the Democrats and the mainstream media was certainly on full display as well. The arrival of the migrants prompted a full-on meltdown from affluent liberal residents of Martha's Vineyard, just as expected. Local political figures described the situation as a crisis, a humanitarian crisis, even an example of human trafficking. Which raises the obvious point, if 50 immigrants arriving in a U.S. community is some kind of disaster, well, what would liberals make of the fact that immigrants are arriving in border towns in far higher numbers than that every single day? Moreover, while the mainstream media's official narrative was that the migrants had been hoodwinked and mistreated, many said they'd been treated just fine and were thankful for the opportunity to travel further into the interior of the country. Watch this MSNBC reporter go completely off script and report the truth.
So there's activists here, Jose, that are saying that these people were victims of human trafficking. They want an investigation from the Justice Department onto what Governor DeSantis is doing, what Governor Greg Abbott is doing, because they're saying that these people are being abused and used to bring a border crisis deeper into the country. Now, I can tell you they are not angry at Ron DeSantis. They are actually thanking him for having brought them to Martha's Vineyard, where they were very well received. But other people, well, they're saying they're being used as political pawns. They don't resent it for now, and they know they're the lucky ones.
They don't resent it. They know they're lucky to be in our country. Think about that. Now let's discuss some facts. Immigrants who come to the U.S. seeking political asylum, well, they're definitionally not illegal immigrants. They are allowed to stay in the U.S. until their asylum claims are adjudicated. Oftentimes they end up staying near the border because that's where they have to go to court. But there's no law saying they can't travel elsewhere. While Democratic official after Democratic official act as if there's just no capacity to handle these migrants, well, there's no reason it should be solely the responsibility of border jurisdictions to do so. Here's D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser completely missing the point.
We're not a border town. We don't have an infrastructure to handle this type of a level of immigration to our city. But we'll create a new normal here in our infrastructure and have a humane welcome for people and an efficient, service provision. But we don't have the ability. We're not Texas.
Yeah, and the people coming to America, from Europe didn't intend to stay at Ellis Island forever either. So we have to be prepared for the whole country is going to receive immigrants if that's the policy. Now, the truth is immigrants want to come to the U.S. because it's the most prosperous and free country on earth. Contrary to the negative view that many spoiled native citizens have of the U.S., immigrants have tasted alternative political structures like communism, and many of them don't care for it one bit because the U.S. is prosperous and free. We will always have immigrants who want to come here. The solution is for Congress to act, not feuding state and local officials. The federal government should make it easier for immigrants to come to America legally, to work here, to pay taxes, to enrich our economy so that they aren't a drain. That's the best way to stop the flood of illegal, unplanned immigration over the border, which is dangerous for the migrants themselves, can overwhelm local officials, and can destabilize border communities. But as long as so many politicians treat immigrants the way Democratic officials are treating them, a boon to our country, as long as they stay somewhere else, like Florida or Texas, well, we're never going to see any progress. Government officials of both parties who claim to be pro-America, pro-immigrant, anti-communism should come together and fix this broken system, and they should do it right now. No more political stunts, no more outraged, affluent liberals. So that's my take, Batya. We discussed it also in the top of the show. I see a lot of kind of hypocrisy, really on all sides here. Media hypocrisy, Democratic hypocrisy, some Republican hypocrisy. And they are human beings. And look, you can't shut down people are always going to want to come to America because it's a great country. We criticize it all the time. We criticize the government's policies. I think they were, I criticize the government all the time. I don't like our foreign policy. I think we were far too restrictive, anti-libertarian when it came to COVID. But you know what? We were a beacon of freedom compared to much of the rest of the globe. People will always seek to come to America, and we have to plan for that in a thoughtful way. We don't want them streaming across the border, coming through the desert, through horrible conditions that are unsafe for them. That's not the right way to do it. So let's do it the right way. And that falls to Congress, which of course does nothing constructive whatsoever. But ideally, they would take that up.
Such a beautiful radar, Robby. You really hit all of the points. I think it's so important what you said about how this MSNBC reporter, before the narrative was solidified, accidentally reported that the migrants were very happy to be at Martha's Vineyard.
Yes.
I'll just throw in one piece of a data point that I think is really important. The Houston immigration courts only approve about 1 in 20 asylum cases, whereas the New York City immigration courts approve 3 out of 4 asylum cases. So anybody telling you that these migrants don't want to be shipped for free up to northern states, up to liberal-led states, just really does not know what they're talking about. And I think that it's very clear to them where the appetite is for this. And I agree with you. Somebody tweeted over the weekend, probably the best tweet I saw on this, the new let them eat cake is let them stay in El Paso, right? Not our problem, right? They are welcome here as long as they're welcome there.
Right, and the whole theory of it, and I agree with this theory, is that immigrants can enrich communities. I understand if they're not operating on the up and up, if they've been forced into illegal conditions or they're going to seek crime. There is a concern that many conservatives have that they're taking rather than contributing because they're not paying taxes or they're taking advantage of welfare or something. I hear all that concern. Although if we just legalize them, then they are paying taxes and they are contributing. So I agree that immigration thoughtfully can enrich our communities, but that was like the Martha's Vineyard people were totally rebelling against that idea. No, get them out of here. Get them out of here. We don't know how to deal with them. We can't handle them. We don't have enough houses. But as you said in our other segment, there's empty houses there, most beautiful mansions that are empty most of the year in that community. So it just doesn't make any sense. And I would like to build more houses everywhere. You know what we actually need to build houses? We need more laborers. We need more immigrants, and they will do that. They will do that work because they're happy to be here. Listen to them. They love America. So much of we criticize the kind of woke left's sort of everything is like blame the United States. This country is so racist and so sexist and so evil and so bad. Immigrants, minorities coming here, do not have that view of this country. They are coming here because they think it's great, and they could actually teach the people at Martha's Vineyard a lesson about what actual political repression looks like, which I think is very funny. But Republicans often fail to take advantage of that interesting dichotomy, because they're still in this mode that I think is wrong, of thinking like, no, immigrants will come here and they'll be Democrats because like they can't think outside that box. Even though how many times do we have to demonstrate that especially the communities from Cuba, Venezuela, et cetera, will vote for very right-wing policies in some cases. Trump did better with them than previous Republicans did. So I think we're maybe coming to understand new things about immigrants. We got to update some priors here, and I hope Republicans do that as well. And we'll have more Rising right after this.